The smell hit her first. Not the sharp chemical smell of a medical ward. Something older. Something that reminded Dara of closed rooms and unwashed grief. She stood in the lower corridor of Dova Station, holding a small bag of supplies, staring at a door that had a yellow seal across it. The seal read, in 4 languages, Biohazard, No entry. Dova Station was one of the busiest transit points in the sector. Ships docked and left every few hours. Traders, diplomats, medical teams, and cargo crews moved through its wide upper corridors like water through pipes. Down here, in the lower levels, nothing moved. The lights were dim. The walls had a faint gray coating from years of disuse. And behind that sealed door, 11 human children were dying. Dara had heard about them 3 days ago. She was working a supply contract on the station, nothing special, just moving medical inventory from one bay to another. One of the dock workers had mentioned it quietly, almost as a rumor. A group of children from a colony ship disaster. No family, no one to claim them. Brought to Dova Station because it had the largest medical facility in the region. That had been 4 months ago. No one had cured them. No one had even named what was wrong with them. She had gone to the consortium's public records terminal and pulled what she could find. The Galactic Medical Consortium ran the medical facility on Dova Station. They were known across the sector for advanced diagnostics and clean procedure. Their physicians had treated thousands of species. Their equipment could read cellular structures at a level most independent doctors could only dream about. And they had given up on 11 human children. The records used careful language. Words like inconclusive diagnosis and non-standard biological response and risk of cross-species contamination. What the words really meant was that the children scared them, and they did not know what to do, and it was easier to seal the door. Dara set her bag down against the wall and sat on the floor. She had been a field medic for 9 years. She had worked on colony ships, in frontier settlements, in places where the nearest hospital was 3 days away by fast transport. She had treated injuries in the dark with 2 hands and a basic kit. She was not famous. She was not connected to any large institution. She was, by most official definitions, nobody important. But she had sat outside sealed doors before. A sound came from down the corridor. Footsteps, precise and unhurried. A tall figure appeared from the shadows. One of the Vithian administrators who managed the lower levels of the station. He was thin, with pale gray skin and large, calm eyes. His name was Solon, according to the badge on his coat. He looked at her, then at the door, then at her again. "You cannot be here," he said. His voice was flat, not unkind. "I am here," Dara said. "This section is restricted. The ward behind that door contains subjects under active biohazard protocol." "They are children," Dara said. Solon paused. He seemed to consider whether to argue that point. He decided not to. The consortium has determined that the condition affecting the occupants of Block 9 is untreatable with current medical knowledge. They are expected to expire within 2 standard cycles. The ward will be cleared and decontaminated after that. Dara looked at the door. 2 cycles. 14 days. "What have they tried?" she asked. Solon listed it without emotion. Full-spectrum antivirals. Cellular repair stimulants. Nutritional infusion. Atmospheric adjustment. For different diagnostic frameworks from 4 different species. Every scan came back with different results. Every treatment either had no effect or briefly stabilized one child while worsening others. The children's biology was not responding the way any model predicted. "No one has gone in without a full isolation suit," Dara said. It was not a question. Of course not. Biohazard protocol requires. "For 4 months," she said. 11 children, and for 4 months. Every person who walked through that door was covered head to toe and spoke to them through a speaker. Solon looked at her. "That is correct." Dara picked up her bag. She stood. "I want access to the ward." "That is not possible. You are not a consortium physician. You have no standing here." "Then I will wait," Dara said. She sat back down. Solon stared at her. He had the expression of someone who had encountered many difficult situations and was mentally sorting this one into the correct category. He seemed to be struggling. "I will inform the senior administrator," he said finally. "Good," said Dara. He walked away. The corridor went quiet again. Dara leaned her back against the cool wall and looked at the yellow seal on the door. On the other side of it, she knew, there were children who had watched their parents die on a broken colony ship, survived a disaster no one should have survived, traveled across space to get help, and been placed in a dim room and left alone while people in sealed suits talked to them through speakers for 4 months. She opened her bag and took out a small notebook. She began to write down everything Solon had told her, every treatment, every result. She wrote slowly and carefully. She was still writing when the lights in the corridor dimmed for the station's night cycle. She did not leave. Solon came back after a full rotation. He looked tired. Dara was still sitting in the corridor, though she had moved twice to stretch her legs and once to find water from a dispenser at the far end of the hall. She had slept for a few hours with her back against the wall and her bag under her head. When Solon appeared with his long coat and careful steps, she was already awake, already watching him walk toward her. He stopped in front of her and looked down. "The senior administrator has reviewed your request and denied it. However," he paused, as if the next words required effort. "Your continued presence in this corridor is a procedural disruption. I am authorized to grant you a single supervised visit of 2 hours, after which you will be escorted from the restricted level." Dara stood and picked up her bag. "Thank you, Solon." He punched a code into the door panel. The yellow seal peeled back with a soft hiss. The door opened. The smell inside was different from the corridor. Warmer. Stale air that had been recycled too many times. The lights inside Block 9 were set to a low blue-white, the kind that alien medical facilities used because it was neutral across most species' visual spectrums. For human eyes, in a room with no windows, it made everything look like the inside of a cold storage unit. 11 children were scattered across the room. Some were on low cots. Some were sitting on the floor. They all looked up when Dara walked in. They were pale, thin. Their eyes had that careful, watchful quality that children develop when too many adults have disappointed them. Dara did not walk quickly. She moved the way she always moved in a new patient space, slowly, without urgency, letting people get used to her before she got close. The oldest child was a boy of about 13. He had dark circles under his eyes and his arms were wrapped around a younger child on the same cot, a girl of maybe 6 who was asleep. He watched Dara the way someone watches a door, measuring whether it will open or close. His name, she would learn, was Rael. "You are not wearing a suit," he said. "No," Dara said. "Everyone wears a suit." "I know." She sat down on the floor, right there in the middle of the room, and opened her bag. "My name is Dara. I am a medic. Not one of the consortium doctors. Just a field medic who works on ships, mostly." She looked up at him. "What is your name?" He told her. Slowly, the others told her theirs too. She did not pull out equipment first. She did not start with scans or instruments. She asked who was coldest, and 2 children raised their hands. She got blankets from her bag, plain thermal blankets, the kind she carried for emergencies. She asked who had not eaten today, and 4 children said nothing, which was its own answer. She went to the ward supply panel and found the nutrition stores, barely touched. The automated system had been running on minimum settings, and she requested broth, simple and warm. While the broth was heating, she began checking temperatures. Not with a scanner, with her hand, placed gently on foreheads, on the backs of necks. She had done it 10,000 times. Her hands knew what to feel for. She sat with a small boy named Bran who was 4 years old and had been sick the longest. He did not speak much. He let her hold his hand without pulling away, and that alone told her something. By the time 2 hours had passed, she had touched every child. She had not run a single diagnostic. Solon appeared in the doorway. "Your time is complete." Dara stayed where she was. "Look at them," she said quietly. He looked. The room was different. It was hard to say exactly how. The children were in the same places, with the same illnesses, but the quality of the air had changed. 2 of the youngest were asleep with full stomachs. Rael had stopped watching the door. "The 2 smallest children had fevers of 39.4 when I arrived," Dara said. "They are both at 38.1 now. That drop happened in 2 hours. No medication. No treatment. I sat with them and kept them warm and fed them." Solon said nothing. "I need to come back tomorrow," Dara said. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I will make a report to the senior administrator." She spent the night in the corridor again. In the morning, Solon returned. Behind him, at a distance, was a tall Drenthi physician in a gray consortium coat. He had pale scales on his forearms and the particular expression of someone who was very confident and very irritated at the same time. Solon said, Dr. Varek has requested to observe your methods. The Drenthi physician, Dr. Varek, looked at Dara the way someone looks at a thing they do not yet have a category for. Dara picked up her bag and nodded. Then let's go in. Dr. Varek stood outside Block 9 for a long time before going in. He reviewed the observation feeds first. 12 hours of recordings from the ward's internal cameras. He watched Dara sit on the floor. He watched her take temperatures with her hand. He watched her talk to the children like they were people instead of cases. He watched the smallest children fall asleep while she was still in the room. Then he watched the biometric data. Stress indicators down across 11 subjects. Fever averages lower in 7. 2 children who had not eaten in 36 hours had consumed a full meal within 1 hour of her visit. He could not explain it cleanly. That bothered him. When he finally entered Block 9, he did it properly. Full diagnostic equipment, clean consortium code, a data recorder running on his wrist. He stood near the door and watched Dara work for 20 minutes without speaking. She was changing a dressing on a wound on one child's arm, a cut from the original colony ship disaster that had never properly healed. She was talking while she worked, something low and easy, about a planet she had once visited that had water that ran bright orange because of the minerals in the ground. The child was listening. His shoulders were not up around his ears. Varek spoke. You are contaminating the study environment. Dara glanced up. Good morning, Dr. Varek. Every physical contact introduces variables. Every conversation you have with the subjects produces emotional responses that interfere with baseline diagnostic readings. That is the point, Dara said. She finished the dressing and looked at him fully. The baselines you have been measuring for 4 months are the readings of children in chronic fear. That is not their baseline. That is what fear looks like in a body that has been afraid for a very long time. Varek set his data recorder running. The cellular degradation in these children is physical. I have 4 months of scans to prove it. The decay is happening at a structural level that emotional state cannot produce. I am not saying emotion caused the structural damage, Dara said. I am saying fear is stopping them from healing it. Human immune systems are directly linked to neurological state in a way that most other species are not. When a human child is in constant distress, the immune system suppresses itself. It is not a philosophy. It is biology. But it only shows up if you know to look for it. Varek was quiet for a moment. He looked at the children. Several of them were watching him with the same careful, measuring look. None of them looked relaxed the way they had looked around Dara when he had reviewed the footage. Your theory is anecdotal, he said. You have no controlled study. You have no peer review. You have 2 days of observation and a comfort blanket. I have 7 children with lower fevers and 2 children who are eating again, Dara said. You have 4 months of decline. The room went very still. Varek did not respond. He completed his observation, made his recordings, and left. In the corridor, he told Solon to issue a formal order. Dara had 1 rotation to vacate the restricted level. She did not go. Instead, she spent that rotation in the ward's small connecting office, going through the consortium's own charter records on Solon's administrative terminal. She read slowly and carefully, the way she always did when something important was at stake. She found what she was looking for buried in Volume 14 of the consortium's founding documents, a clause written 300 years ago for a species called the Vethmirani, whose biology was so different from any known template that outside practitioners had been forbidden to treat them without a designated advocate from their own species. The right of proxy advocate. It had been used 11 times in 300 years. It had never been used for humans, because humans had never needed it. Until now. Dara filed the paperwork herself, using the standard consortium submission portal. She registered as the official proxy advocate for all 11 children in Block 9, citing their human biology as falling outside the competency range of the current treating practitioners. Varek received the notification 40 minutes later. He came to the corridor where Dara was sitting and looked at her with an expression she had not seen on his face before. It was not anger exactly. It was the look of someone who had just discovered the game had more pieces than they thought. You cannot be removed until a formal review hearing, she said, before he could speak. That will take 3 rotations minimum. By my count, that is enough time to see whether 7 improving children become 9. Varek stood very still. You are not a consortium physician. You have no formal standing here beyond a paperwork trick. I have standing with those 11 children, Dara said. That is the only standing I need. He left without responding. Over the next 3 days, Dara did not stop working. She created a daily care schedule. She kept the ward warm. She treated secondary infections with her own basic kit. She talked to the children, learned their names properly, learned what each one was afraid of and what each one found comforting. On the second day, a small girl named Sola, who had not walked unassisted in 2 weeks, stood up on her own and crossed the room to sit next to Dara. The other children watched her. The room was quiet. Then Rael, the oldest, said, "She has not done that in a long time." Dara looked at Sola, who was already leaning against her side, already half asleep. "I know," Dara said. 3 days later, the hearing began. The hearing room was on the upper levels of Dova Station, which felt deliberate. Everything up here was clean and well lit and smelled faintly of the consortium's standard sanitizing agent. The furniture was the kind that communicated authority without trying too hard. 5 panel members sat behind a long, curved desk, 2 Drinthi, 1 Vithian, 1 species Dara did not recognize, and at the far end, an elderly Sarthi with silver-gray fur and small, careful eyes. His name, the registrar had told her, was Oren. Dr. Varek presented his case first. He was thorough. He had charts. He had 4 months of scan data. He had a full breakdown of every treatment attempted and every result recorded. He spoke for 20 minutes without notes, which meant he had been preparing longer than she had. His argument was clean. Dara had no medical accreditation recognized by the consortium. Her methods were not reproducible under standard conditions. Her use of the proxy advocate clause was an abuse of a provision designed for species with no galactic medical representation, and the apparent improvements in some children were within normal fluctuation ranges. When he finished, the panel turned to Dara. She had 1 folder. Inside it were 11 sheets of paper, 1 for each child. Handwritten charts. 12 days of temperature readings, food intake, sleep hours, and behavioral observations. All done by hand, in ink, because she did not have access to the consortium's digital recording systems. She placed the folder on the desk and did not open it. 6 of 11 children show measurable and consistent improvement over 12 days, she said. I am not asking you to accept my methods as standard. I am asking you to accept the results as real. She explained her theory the same way she had explained it to Varek, but more carefully this time, knowing this audience. She spoke about the connection between human neurological state and immune function. She used proper terms, not because she was performing competence, but because the terms were accurate and she knew them. She described the stress cascade feedback loop, how sustained fear in human children suppresses the immune system's ability to address even physical cellular damage, and how that suppression can compound over months until the body begins to fail in ways that look like a novel disease because the scanners are reading the damage without reading its cause. The panel listened. Some made notes. Varek watched from his seat with the careful stillness of someone waiting for a mistake. One of the Drinthi panel members asked about replication. Dara said she welcomed any attempt to replicate her conditions, and that the conditions were not complicated. Presence, warmth, consistency, basic physical care. She was not asking the consortium to abandon science. She was asking them to account for variables their instruments could not measure. The Vithian panel member asked about risk to the station from continued open access to the ward. Dara cited the 4 months of 0 recorded cross-contamination events and suggested that if the children were truly a biohazard, the evidence would have appeared before now. Then Oren, the elderly Sarthi at the far end of the panel, spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet and slow, the voice of someone who had learned that speaking quickly was usually not worth the effort. If your theory is correct, he said, why did the illness begin on the colony's ship? The trauma of arrival on this station came after, but the children were already sick. The room went very still. Dara stood with that question for a moment. She did not rush past it. She thought about Rael, the way he held the younger ones. She thought about Bran, who almost never spoke. She thought about what it means to be a child and watch the people who protect you disappear all at once. They lost their parents in the colony ship disaster, she said. Every one of them. The ship broke apart. They survived, but the adults who were with them did not. The trauma did not begin when they arrived here. She paused. It began when they watched their families die. They have been afraid ever since. They have had no one to tell them it was going to be all right, because no one who loved them survived to say so. The room was quiet for a long time. Varric looked at the table. Oren picked up his pen and wrote something. Then he set the pen down and looked at the other panel members. Something passed between them. Not words, just the small movements that happen when people who have worked together a long time say something to each other without speaking. Oren said, "The proxy advocate registration will stand. The human medic Dara is authorized to continue her care of the occupants of Block 9 under monitored conditions. A formal review of her documented findings will be conducted in 30 days. Varric stood. "This is not a medical decision. It is. It is the panel's decision," Oren said, without raising his voice. "Thank you, Dr. Varric." Dara walked back through the station's lower corridors. The lights were dim, the same as always. When she reached Block 9 and entered, 11 children looked up at her. Rail stood. "What happened?" "We can stay," she said. Something in his face moved, carefully, like something long held down deciding it was safe to surface. In the corner, small Sola was already asleep, one arm around a child even younger than herself, the way children do when they have learned that keeping someone else warm is the only way to feel warm themselves. Dara sat down on the floor. She had 30 days to prove what she already knew was true. She picked up her notebook and got back to work. Weeks moved differently inside Block 9. Outside, Dova Station kept its rhythms. Ships came and went. The upper corridors stayed busy and loud. Down in the lower levels, time ran slower, measured in temperatures and breathing rates, and the small daily victories of children eating more than they had the day before. 8 of them were getting better. Dara could see it clearly now, not just in the numbers, but in the way they moved, the way they talked. Rail had started organizing the younger children into small routines. Sola had found a piece of frayed wire somewhere and was making shapes with it, animals and ships, and teaching the others to do the same. Children, when they feel safe, find ways to play. Dara had learned that years ago. It was one of the most reliable signs she knew. 3 were not getting better. 2 were progressing slowly, stubbornly, but progressing. The third was Bran. He was 4 years old, and he had been sick the longest. In the first days after Dara arrived, he had improved with the others. His fever dropped. He ate more. He started watching her with those serious dark eyes and occasionally allowing a small curved expression that was almost a smile. Then, 3 weeks into her care, something shifted. It happened the way bad things often happen, quietly, at night, without announcement. Dara was doing her evening check when she noticed his breathing had changed. Shallow. Fast. His temperature, which had been steadily dropping, had climbed back up past 39. His hands were cold, even though the rest of him was warm. She stayed by him through the night. She kept him calm. She talked to him the way she had learned he liked. Not questions, just quiet stories about things she had seen, animals and landscapes and funny things that happened on ships. He listened even when his eyes were closed. By the next morning, he was worse. She understood then what she was looking at. Bran's stress cascade had not simply suppressed his immune system the way it had with the others. It had run longer and deeper. He was 4 years old, and he had been frightened for almost a year. The damage to his cellular repair systems had gone further than basic nursing could reach. She could keep him calm. She could keep him from getting worse faster. But she could not reverse the structural damage with what she had in her kit. She needed the consortium's equipment. Specifically, the regenerative support units used for deep cellular repair, machines that cost more than most independent medics made in a year and that she had no authorization to access. She left Rail in charge and went upstairs. Varric was in his office. He looked up when she entered. He did not tell her to leave, which she took as a small sign that things had changed between them, even slightly. She told him about Bran. She told him exactly what she was seeing and what she believed it meant. She told him what she needed. Varric listened without interrupting. Then he said, "You are asking me to authorize access to equipment valued at several 100,000 credits for a patient whose condition you have diagnosed based on field observation." "Yes," Dara said. "And you expect me to accept that your field diagnosis is more accurate than 4 months of consortium scans. I expect you to look at a 4-year-old child who is getting worse and ask yourself what you are willing to do about it," she said. She did not say it with anger. She said it simply, the way you say something that is only true. "I am not going over your head this time. I am not using a charter clause. I am asking you, doctor to doctor, to help me save a child. Something happened in Varek's face. It was not dramatic. It was the small shift of someone who has been standing in one position too long and finally moves. He was quiet for almost a full minute. Then he stood and took his consortium access card from his desk. Show me, he said. They walked back down together. Varek entered the ward without his isolation suit for the first time. He stood at the edge of the room and looked at the children, who looked back at him with their careful eyes. Then he walked to Bran's cot and bent down. He did his own assessment, hands as well as instruments. Dara watched him and said nothing. When he straightened up, he said, I will have the regenerative support unit brought down. It arrived within the hour. Varek stayed. They worked through the night in a way that had no formal structure. He ran the equipment and she ran the child, and between them they held Bran steady through the hours when it could have gone the other way. Near the end of the station's night cycle, Bran's breathing slowed to something even. His temperature dropped. His hands warmed. He was not healed. He had a long way yet to go. But the numbers were moving in the right direction, and the machines showed the cellular repair beginning to take hold. Dara sat back on her heels and let out a long breath. Varek said nothing for a while. Then he gathered his things and walked to the door. He stopped there and stood for a moment with his back to her. She heard him say, quietly, as if to no one in particular, He is very small. Yes, Dara said. He is. Varek left. Dara stayed. The way she always did, listening to 11 children breathe in the dim blue light of a room that was slowly, stubbornly, becoming something other than a place to die. Bran took his first steps without help on a quiet afternoon, 6 weeks after the night that almost took him. He did not announce it. He simply stood up from his cot, looked at the floor for a moment as if calculating something, and walked 6 steps to where Dara was sitting. Then he sat down next to her and picked up the piece of cloth she had been folding and began to fold it himself, with intense concentration, the way 4-year-olds approach any task that interests them. Rail saw it from across the room. He said nothing. He just looked at Dara, and she looked back at him, and that was enough. After that, Bran improved steadily. The last of the 11. By the end of the 2nd month, all 11 children had been cleared of every measurable sign of cellular degradation. The consortium's own scans confirmed it. Varek ran the final diagnostic himself and sent the results to the panel with a note that Dara was never shown, but that Solon later told her, quietly, had been 3 pages long. The formal review happened on a gray morning when the station was quiet. Dara sat in the same hearing room as before, in front of the same panel. Oren was at the far end again. This time, there was no argument from Varek. He sat at the side of the room, not at the consortium's table, and he was the one who had requested the review. Dara's documented findings, 12 weeks of handwritten records, 11 patient histories, a complete description of stress cascade immune collapse, and its specific presentation in human children, were entered into the consortium's formal medical archive. Varek had added his own analysis, his own scans, his own data. He had written it as a co-authored paper. Oren said, "This is the first time in the consortium's history that a field practitioner has contributed a primary classification document to our archive." Dara said, "I hope it is not the last." Oren allowed something that was nearly a smile. "I believe that is now unlikely." The paper spread further than anyone expected. Medical practitioners across species requested copies. Several Sarthi physicians sent formal responses noting that their own diagnostic frameworks did not account for psychological state in species whose neurology was poorly understood by outside practitioners. 2 independent research groups filed requests to study the stress cascade mechanism in other species with similar neurological structures. It was, Dara was told by people who cared about such things, a significant development. She did not spend much time thinking about that. She spent her time in Block 9. The ward was different now. Solon had quietly authorized a few changes. The lights were warmer. There were proper beds. Someone had placed a small shelf on one wall and put books on it. Actual physical books, which the children had gone through methodically and with great seriousness. The yellow seal on the door was gone. The question of where the children would go was not a simple one. They had no families left. The consortium had no protocols for long-term housing of human orphans. Rael, who was 13 and sharper than most adults Dara had worked with, had attended 2 of the administrative meetings about the matter and asked questions that had caused the administrators considerable difficulty. At the 3rd meeting, he had said clearly, "We want to stay with Dara." Dara had been informed of this afterward by Solon, who had delivered the message with his usual calm expression, but with something behind it that she thought might have been amusement. The paperwork took time. Everything involving the consortium took time. But it moved forward. On the last day of Dara's supply contract, which had been quietly extended 3 times by station administration without being discussed with her directly, there was a small ceremony. Solon presented her with a consortium commendation tile. It was gray and smooth and had her name engraved on it in 6 languages. Varric attended. He stood at the edge of the small gathering in his gray coat and said nothing during the presentation. Afterward, when most people had moved away, he came and stood beside her and looked at the commendation tile. "I have been practicing medicine for 40 years, he said. Dara waited. "I have treated 1,000 patients. I have used instruments that can read a cell's history going back 4 generations. He was quiet for a moment. "I had not understood, before this, that a person can be a medical instrument. That presence itself is a treatment." Dara looked at him. "You stayed with Bran that night." "Yes," he said. "Then you understood it before you said it out loud." He thought about that. Then he nodded, once, and walked away. That evening, Dara went back to Block 9. She did not have anywhere else to be, and she did not want to be anywhere else. The 11 children were there, settled into the ordinary routines of children who have learned that tomorrow will probably be all right. Sola was making wire shapes. Bran was asleep against Rael's side, small and warm and breathing easy. Dara sat down on the floor, the way she always did. She took a battered book from her bag, the one she had carried for years across ships and settlements and places that had no proper name. She had read it to herself so many times the spine was soft as cloth. She opened it and began to read aloud. Rael listened. Then he asked, in the way that he asked things, directly and without softening, "What do humans do when everything goes wrong?" Dara kept her eyes on the page. "We stay," she said. Outside the ward's small window, the stars moved past, slow and endless, the way they always do.